Good afternoon. My name is Michael Terlep. I'm an archaeologist with the North Kaibab Ranger District of the Kaibab National Forest, and today I'm going to be presenting Enigmatic Traces of Sacred Water, Cup and Channel Petroglyphs of the Far West. Across the high plateaus and painted deserts of the Grand Staircase and the Arizona Strip rests a unique rock art style referred to by archaeologists as Cup and Channel Petroglyphs, and by locals as water glyphs. These Cup and Channel Petroglyphs have intrigued archaeologists and casual observers alike for decades. Hypotheses and mythos for the age and function of these unique petroglyphs, posed by local residents, span the plausible to the illogical. However, what does the archaeology and the ethnographic record tell us about these ambiguous bedrock features of the far west Puebloan world? This presentation will provide an analysis of the expanding spatial distribution of petroglyph sites and the variability between panels. Through this research, I present evidence for the possible function and temporal affiliation of these unique petroglyphs. To begin, the basic cup and channel form consists of a circular or oval element measuring 35 centimeters to 75 centimeters in diameter, a narrow linear element measuring 2 to 5 centimeters wide and 2 to 3 centimeters deep that spans the interior of the circular element, a wider exterior linear element measuring 50 to 120 centimeters long by 6 to 10 centimeters wide and up to 5 centimeters deep, and 1 to 4 cupules. These petroglyphs are almost exclusively found on horizontal surfaces, generally with less than 10 degrees of slope, making them difficult to see from even a few feet away. Their prehistoric creators had a flair for the dramatic by deeply pecking the glyphs into vibrant colored bedrock ledges and other rock surfaces at prominent points above the confluence of drainages, springs, perennial and seasonal streams, and floodplains. Cup and channel petroglyphs have become the stuff of legend in the region, with observers posing near mythical hypotheses for the age and function. The most well-known hypothesis suggests the petroglyphs function as prehistoric navigational markers to water. According to this hypothesis, the elements of the glyph represent landscape features pointing or guiding a thirsty traveler to water. The term water glyph was coined to support this hypothesis. Another popular hypothesis suggests the petroglyphs represent archaeoastronomical observations of the sun, the moon, and other cosmic associations. Still others postulate the glyphs are historic tar burners used by Euro-Americans to produce pine pitch during early Western settlement. Archaeologists generally dismiss these hypotheses for reasons that will be described later. Now, the most ostentatious speculation connects cup and channel petroglyphs with ritual human sacrifice and buried treasure. Southwestern folklore proclaims that following the death of Aztec ruler Montezuma by the Spanish in AD 1520, a group of priests and slaves supposedly fled the Aztec capital with a vast treasure of gold. Distraught with the impending Spanish pursuit, the group hid the Aztec wealth in an unknown location. Popular television programs continue to promote the local legend that the Aztec traveled over 1,500 miles to the canyons and plateaus surrounding modern-day Kanab, Utah, to bury their riches. Stretching the legend further, TV hosts speculated that the regional cup and channel petroglyphs are in some way associated with the Aztec practices of human sacrifice and the location of Montezuma's gold. Unlike the other hypotheses, which at least are plausible, the Aztec legend rests entirely on the shoulders of conjecture and mythos. In fact, the origin of the human sacrifice connection can likely be attributed to a single source. A landowner near Kanab once guided visitors on a morbid tour of human remains eroding from pre-Columbian burials on his property. He ushered visitors past a cup and channel glyph that had been splattered with rose-colored paint to imitate blood, and told his guests that those buried on site had been sacrificed upon the petroglyph. Now, in actuality, archaeologists have demonstrated that the deceased on this site lived during the Basket Maker II period, over 1,000 years before the Aztec even began construction of their massive capital, let alone its fall, and showed that the human remains had no evidence of violent deaths, but rather died of natural causes. Furthermore, we have no evidence of human sacrifice in the far western Puebloan region, and most cases of violent interaction are confined to specific times and places. Before I dive into the petroglyphs themselves, it's worthwhile to briefly mention the cultural history of the region, as it will shine a light on the age of cup and channels. The cultural progression of the Arizona Strip and the Grand Staircase physiographic regions follow a similar trajectory to other regions in the northern and central Colorado Plateau, with Paleo-Indian and Archaic groups developing into early agricultural basket maker II populations. The early formative periods following the basket maker II period, however, differ from their Puebloan neighbors east and south of the Colorado River. The basket maker III, Pueblo I, and early Pueblo II periods show minimal changes in pit house architecture, settlement patterns, site layout, and material culture through time, with no examples of public or ceremonial architecture, commonly known as kivas elsewhere in the Puebloan world. While emulation of ceramic styles and other material cultural traits occur within the region, it appears the far western Puebloans, also referred to as the virgin branch of the ancestral Puebloans, proceeded on a cultural trajectory that generally involved limited external influences from the broader Puebloan world. During the Pueblo I period, and accelerating during the Pueblo II period, Puebloans settled virtually every arable location from the rim of the Grand Canyon, north to the White Cliffs, and from Las Vegas, east to the Caparowitz Plateau. At roughly AD 1050 or 1100, an influx of Kayenta Pueblo cultural material and architecture, commonly associated with sites in northeastern Arizona, appears within the far western region. Referred to as the Kayenta intrusion, this influx is often considered evidence of Kayenta migration into the area. Although initially far western and Kayenta sites are easily differentiated, assimilation begins with a mixing of architecture and material culture. This migration is relatively short, and assimilation is quick. The sites in the area suggest the Kayenta migrants had completely assimilated into the far western Pueblo lifeway, or possibly returned back to the Kayenta heartland by the early Pueblo III period. By the mid-Pueblo III period, the far western region is heavily depopulated. Pneumatic expansion and severe drought are often cited as the mechanisms for Puebloan depopulation. Researchers have suggested that far western groups moved east and assimilated with Kayenta populations, moved north and assimilated with Fremont groups, or abandoned sedentary agriculture in favor of a more mobile subsistence strategy. Congregations of cupules and grooves are common in the Great Basin and Southwest, as well as elsewhere around the globe. In fact, many archaeologists consider cupules to be the earliest form of rock art, dating back to the Paleolithic period in some parts of the world. Despite the broad-scale use of cupules in prehistoric societies, they are uniquely arranged, sized, and placed in the far western region. Hundreds of cup and channel petroglyphs are reported from the Utah-Nevada border, east to the Johnson Canyon drainages in the Grand Staircase, north to Orderville, Utah, and south to Kanab Creek Canyon in Arizona. This distribution covers a relatively small expanse of land, approximately 150 kilometers east to west, by 60 kilometers north to south, with at least one previously documented outlier appearing near Marble Canyon, 82 kilometers southeast of the Johnson Canyon sites. This distribution is well within the commonly considered territory of the far western cultural region. Within this main distribution, considerable variation occurs within the petroglyph form, most often including additional circles, but also additional cupules, additional or isolated channels, and the incorporation of natural bedrock features. In many cases, the glyphs are also purposely placed near natural depressions or natural basins within the rock surface. Cup and channels appear isolated or in concentrations of 2 to 3 glyphs placed at the same location, or along the same canyon rim spaced only a few feet to a few hundred feet apart. Outside the far west region, mosaics of cupules and channels appear widely. However, only a handful of proper cup and channel petroglyphs are known, concentrated within the ancestral Hopi lands within the Little Colorado River Valley and on the Hopi Mesas in northern Arizona. Aside from one known example of a diamond-shaped cup and channel from the Hopi Mesas, these outlier petroglyphs stick closely to the basic form of a single cupule at the rear of the circle, a narrow interior groove, a wider exterior groove, and a circle element. All these outliers also follow the same environmental pattern of cup and channel placement that will be discussed shortly. Archaeologists have no reliable absolute methods for dating petroglyphs. We must rely on relative dating methods such as layering, known as superimpositioning, association of designs with datable archaeological deposits, spatial distribution, weathering of rock surfaces, the accumulation of manganese and iron oxides, known as desert varnish, and in some cases, dating lichen growth within the petroglyph elements. All of these methods depend heavily on cultural and environmental factors. Particular types of lichen, for example, live for thousands of years, but grow at different rates depending on climate, precipitation, and the type of rock, such as limestone, sandstone, or basalt. The particular type of lichen that covers cup and channel petroglyphs appears quite old. However, the lifespan of this lichen is only about 50 years due to the erosive nature of sandstone, which reduces the lichen's ability to attach to the rock surface for long periods of time. Dating based on the accumulation of desert varnish proves to be problematic as well, and can be made more difficult by the superimpositioning of different cup and channel elements. Because desert varnish develops through a variety of chemical and physical reactions caused by natural processes, its accumulation may vary over time based on the position, orientation, and aspect of the panel. Desert varnish within cup and channel petroglyphs can vary significantly due to their horizontal positioning, open air placement, rain flow and pooling, snowmelt, and other natural factors. Nevertheless, based on the accumulation of desert varnish on some superimposed petroglyph elements versus others, we believe that later prehistoric people copied or modified pre-existing cup and channel petroglyphs and contributed additional circles, channels, and cupules at later dates. One example is a 5-inch miniature cup and channel petroglyph near Fredonia, Arizona, which appears horizontally juxtaposed with dozens of spirals, broad-shouldered anthropomorphs, possible bear claws, and other abstract images. Spiral motifs are ubiquitous across the Southwest by the Pueblo II period, from AD 950 to 1150, and bear claws commonly represent the Hopi bear clan, while broad-shouldered anthropomorphs are more closely resemble Basketmaker II or Basketmaker III figures. The consistent accumulation of desert varnish within the petroglyphs at these panels indicates the miniature cup and channel petroglyph is present in the archaeological record by the Pueblo II period. This may reflect Pueblo II period groups emulating a much older petroglyph design. The presence of the broad-shouldered anthropomorphs suggests some petroglyph elements, possibly including the miniature cup and channel, can date back to the basket maker periods. Assessing the spatial distribution of archaeological sites in relation to cup and channel glyphs gives us another method to investigate the petroglyph's age. If we consistently find a rock art style near a particular type of archaeological site, such as agricultural settlements, we can infer a connection between them. Cup and channel petroglyphs are primarily distributed along low elevation mesas, knolls, and canyon rims of the southern Grand Staircase region, with the occasional glyph along the Virgin River extending into eastern Nevada. Archaeological data tells us that these low elevations were inhabited throughout the human occupation of the region, especially by agricultural populations. These agriculturalists farmed these low elevation canyon bottoms and floodplains, taking advantage of high water tables and floodwater farming opportunities. Toward the end of the Basketmaker II period, around AD 400 to 500, farmers started to move to higher elevations to adapt to dryland farming techniques, relying on adequate rainfall to quench their crops. However, cup and channel petroglyphs still appear along these low elevations and above or near early agricultural sites. Ideal agricultural conditions had developed by the Pueblo II period due to improved climate, specifically increased precipitation. These conditions encouraged families to expand to every arable niche of the far west. As previously mentioned, during the mid to late P2 period, Kanda groups from east of the Colorado River immigrated into House Rock Valley, the Paria Plateau, and across the Grand Staircase. This Pueblo II population boom often hides earlier archaeological deposits and sometimes results in the association of cup and channel glyphs with later prehistoric sites. But while the Pueblo II population moved into the furthest corners of the region, we still only find cup and channel glyphs concentrated within these lower elevations, where basket maker groups settled. Aside from a single known outlier, high elevation P2 habitation areas such as the Paria Plateau, House Rock Valley, and the Kaparowitz Plateau contain no cup and channel glyphs. Combined with what we know about the distribution of basket maker versus Puebloan groups through time, the distribution of these petroglyphs across the landscape suggests that they were produced by early agricultural communities. Rock art is deeply tied to place, as reflected on the landscape. To separate rock art from the landscape is to negate insight and function. Like freeway billboards, rock art placed high upon canyon walls conveys information and influences behavior. Vertical panels visible from great distances attract, dissuade, or inform others. Similar to no trespassing signs, a cross above a church, or interpretive signs along a trail, prehistoric rock art illustrated property rights, territorial boundaries, ethnic or group identity, biographical or mythical stories, trails, or significant locations. In some cases, horizontal rock art panels marked intimate places for people already knowledgeable about the landscape. Rock art on horizontal surfaces may represent sacred locations not intended to be seen by those outside of a certain community. Three landscape patterns emerge when we study the orientation of cup and channel glyphs to the surrounding landscape features. The channel element of the glyph extends to or slopes towards a crack or space between two rock surfaces, towards a natural basin, or to the edge of a rock surface with a small ledge or level surface located below. While cup and channel glyphs are oriented in all 360 degrees, the glyph's position towards one of these three features remains consistent across hundreds of cup and channel glyphs in the region. The depth of the petroglyph elements is also consistent across hundreds of examples. Much time and effort were required to achieve such depth, especially in the exterior channel, which can often measure 3 feet long and up to 4 inches in depth. The effort to produce this glyph in relation to the glyph's orientation towards natural features tells us that the petroglyphs had a physical function, as well as a symbolic meaning. Indigenous communities around the world speak of cupules as a means of accessing the supernatural. Many cultures, including some southwestern groups, associate humankind's emergence into the world with an opening, crevice, or basin in the ground. A small cylindrical pit, for example, is pegged into the floor of prehistoric and historic kivas in Puebloan cultures to represent their emergence into the world. Like Puebloan kiva pits, often known as sipapus, cupules became important aspects of ceremony and can act as shrines for prayer or ritual. Some cupules, on both vertical and horizontal surfaces, have been ascribed to fertility, birthing, and coming-of-age rituals, experiences related to welcoming a person into the world. Historical accounts from the Pueblo Zuni describe a ritual in which pregnant women placed offerings in cupules and groups, somewhat resembling cup and channel petroglyphs, to pray for their health of their unborn child. Native people of the Southwest also associate cupules and grooves with rainmaking or rain collection. The importance of rain within agricultural and especially desert societies cannot be understated. Water remains the very lifeblood of farmers, regardless of what decade, century, or millennium we are discussing. As anthropologist John Lofton says of Hopi, quote, "Rain, or rather an aspect of rain, is the source of life and creation, and thus a prayer for rain is above all a prayer for the creation of the world." Lofton's comments reflect the ritual importance of water in southwestern cultures. Sacred rain or water appears often in Puebloan ceremonies, offerings, medicine making, mural paintings, kachina art, and altar hangings. Whether the symbolism relates to rain-making or sacred water collection, or fertility and puberty rites, the connection of cupules to the creation and preservation of life is important to acknowledge. Bedrock features perform a physical role in ritual and ceremony as well. In 1906, Jesse Walter Fuchs, a prominent early southwestern archaeologist, reported Hopi religious specialists placing offerings of cornmeal and other ceremonial paraphernalia in bedrock cupules surrounded by rock art depicting a water bird. In fact, we have several accounts of Puebloan groups offering prayer sticks, known as pahos, near springs and water shrines. Rock art analyst Polly Shasma has postulated that cupules in southwestern contexts were filled with sand in which to suspend pahos. Several of the large P3 ruins in Mesa Verde National Park contain bedrock cupules, thought to have been offering locations. Over 20 bedrock basins span the floor of Longhouse Ruin in Mesa Verde, near a seep at the rear of this impressive residence. The basins are connected by meandering grooves that mimic the natural flow of water and funnel it from one basin to another, likely as part of a sacred water ritual. While we have much to learn about the age and function of cup and channel glyphs, archaeological and ethnographic research allows us to formulate some hypotheses. Quickly to address the most well-known hypothesis, as it is quite interesting, and the local namesake, water glyphs. Under this hypothesis, the glyphs function as prehistoric maps pointing to distant water sources. Since water is the most basic component of life, it is safe to say that the local populations are intimately familiar with water sources across the region. Therefore, these water maps are intended for those outside of the region. However, since these glyphs are constricted to the far west, with a handful of outliers concentrated along the Little Colorado River, visitors to the region would not know the meaning or function of the glyphs. In a similar vein, and as discussed previously, rock art intended for public audience is placed high on prominent vertical locations to amplify visibility. Rock art located on horizontal surfaces is intended for community or family members, generally with a more sacred or personal function. Considering cup and channel petroglyphs are only visible from a few feet away, a traveler would need to be familiar with the location of the glyphs, meaning they are also knowledgeable with the location of water. Likewise, GIS viewshed and spatial analyses demonstrate that rivers, springs, and seeps do not align with the location the petroglyphs are, quote, pointing. Or other water locations appear closer than the direction the glyph is pointing to. In fact, a consistent pattern between all cup and channel petroglyphs is their proximity to water sources. Numerous cup and channels appear along Kanab Creek, the Virgin River, Johnson Canyon Wash, and other perennial and seasonal streams, or directly above flowing springs, locations in which a traveler would see or hear the water long before seeing the glyph. And these are also locations where people normally settle. While the glyph as functioning as a map is a fascinating concept, there are multiple lines of evidence demonstrating the glyphs could not function for navigation. Ultimately, humans do not place maps intended to direct travelers over great distances on horizontal surfaces with variable and monumental topographic obstacles to impede the traveler. My research of the archaeology, the landscape patterns, the depth of elements, and the ethnographic accounts suggests cup and channel petroglyphs functioned as shrines used within a water-related ritual. Water, either poured into the glyph directly or captured during rainstorms, flows through the circle element, through the narrow interior channel, and eventually drains from the exterior channel. Water draining over ledges or into natural basins can be collected for ceremonial purposes. Water flowing through crevices or the space between two rock surfaces was likely symbolic, perhaps a physical manifestation of an emergence story or prayer. People also likely used the cupules as containers for pahos, semi-precious stones, and other types of ceremonial paraphernalia or offerings. Now, the sociocultural function or meaning of the cup and channel ritual is beyond the grasp of archaeological inquiry. However, we can propose some possibilities based on the ethnographic record. Given the connection of cupules with fertility and emergence from across the Desert West and even around the world, it is reasonable to infer cup and channel use with fertility or coming of age rituals. The flow of water may represent the path of a person, flowing from one world to the next. In fact, cup and channel glyphs even appear similar to depictions of vulvas in rock art. Similarly, the use of cupules elsewhere in the Desert West for sacred rain calling may also account for the function of the ritual. Concentrations of cup and channel glyphs likely represent community or clan gathering centers for ritual practices. Petroglyphs are spaced across canyon rims, similar to shrines in other southwestern cultural areas, may be associated with rituals in which people visited each location in a ceremonial procession. Likewise, glyphs appear across the canyons from one another, suggesting people maintained line of sight while conducting ritual practices. For example, this particular circle glyph appears on the only suitable bedrock exposure along this particular band at the same elevation or level as the cup and channel directly across the canyon. So while other bedrock surfaces would have been more suitable further along the canyon rim, the prehistoric creator selected this location to maintain line of sight with those practicing the ritual activity across canyon. This glyph, while it lacks an internal and external channel, drains into the space between two rock surfaces, suggesting the landscape patterns or positioning were more important than the actual elements of the petroglyph themselves. Current evidence, including the environmental setting, association of archaeological sites, superimpositioning of rock art styles, and the presence of the miniature petroglyph, indicates cup and channel petroglyphs are present in the archaeological record by the Pueblo II period, from AD 950 to 1150. The distribution and relationship between sites further suggests that cup and channel petroglyphs developed during the Basket Maker II period sometime between 1000 BC and AD 500. The presence of the outlier petroglyphs near Basket Maker sites in northeastern Arizona, along the Little Colorado River, support their connections with early agricultural societies. Ongoing research associates cup and channel petroglyphs with basket maker groups who primarily settled within the lower elevations of the Grand Staircase and Arizona Strip region. These early agriculturalists may have had a social identity or ethnic background separate from those living elsewhere in the far west or in the Puebloan world. Variability in the petroglyph design likely began as an expression of individuality within family units. Through time, people contributed additional elements to the glyphs as their symbolic nature evolved. The appearance of cup and channel glyphs in the Little Colorado River Valley likely results from trade, migration, or to strengthen cross-cultural relationships. The petroglyphs in these cases may have functioned as clan symbols to identify where an individual came from. Thank you for watching this presentation, and a special thank you to Alan Titus and Raven Chavez for inviting me to participate in the Grand Staircase-Escalante 25th anniversary event. I'd also like to thank those who have supported this research over the years, including Doug McFadden, Matt Zweifel, Connie Reed, Francis Smiley, Kelly Hayes Gilpin, Sally Cole, and Bill Bryce. Thank you.